We turn now quickly to Professor Peter Dubovský. Is well known to all of us, Professor of Old Testament here at the Biblical Institute, Vice Rector of the Institute. He's a graduate of Harvard Divinity School and has a special interest in the ancient Near Eastern literature and the biblical text. And he's currently writing a commentary on the books of Kings for the Illumination series to be published by Erdmans. And I would just add a personal note that I heard Peter give a plenary session at the Yosef meeting in Zurich, which was already mentioned this morning. It was absolutely brilliant, where he related the ways of communication in the ancient Near East to what we discover in the Bible. So I can assure you we're going to hear a very interesting lecture. Peter, to you the word. Yeah. I'm not gonna. Of course.
Thank you very much, and especially thank you, Paul, for organizing this fantastic conference. So the theme or the question you gave me was from the Bible to the ancient Near Eastern context. Looking at the definition of the term context or contextualization, we can notice three possible paths for setting up the boundaries of this paper. So the first one would be literary context. Second, and this is what we can call as a canonical approach or synchronic approach. Interpretative context, what we can call Wirkungsgeschichte. And the third one would be circumstances in which an event occurs or a setting. My paper will focus on the third meaning of the term context, namely on the circumstances in which an event occurred, or in the terms of the Webster dictionary, we are about to explore the interrelated conditions in which something exists or occurs. Okay. There is an old version of my, the old version of the PowerPoint. Okay, so if we look at this, what we have, we can say that this kind of sociological study, the sociological studies also use these context studies, and we can notice that there is, how do they use it? The goal of context method is to learn about users' environments, workflows, tools, pain points, and habits. Three popular context methods are diary studies, field studies, and contextual inquiry. So this is, the context studies are well known, but what is our problem and how we are going to use this kind of contextual studies for the Bible? In the Bible, we can approach the context studies from three angles that would correspond to three main extra-biblical sources, namely archaeological, textual, and glyptic sources. Thus, we can explore the archaeological data and how the archaeological finds can contextualize the biblical stories, be it for the historical reconstruction of the events, religious reforms, or we can also use it for the same we can use also for the inscriptions and images. From the outset, it is necessary to say that each of these fields have their own methodological premises and require specific skills, not only for the correct analysis of the data, but also for the appropriate interpretation of the data. Therefore, the context method requires training in both biblical exegesis or archaeology, epigraphy, or so. And we have already heard that there are very pluses and minuses of these methodologies, for example, maximalist and minimalist, and so on. So if you are a biblical scholar and if you try to do something with context studies, you can use, as Mark mentioned, a lot of material from Mesopotamia for textual studies. We have letters, we have 1 million tablets. But if you move to the biblical, to the Israel world, Israel-Palestine, you have only very few sherds with very, let's say, useless informations, types like names or numbers. So if you want to apply what Mark suggested, for example, study of senses or feelings, you are completely frustrated because you don't have the material to do it. So now how we can get out of this? I went through onomastic and all these strange names you have in the ostraka, bulla, and seals. There are more than 1,000 names in ostraka extra-biblical material. Can these provide sort of specific material for contextualizing the biblical narratives? This is my question. So going through all these materials, over these 1,000 names, I came to the conclusion that it is possible to divide them into 4 different types. So the first time of the ostraka seals, it can be so-called Jerusalem type. So we have over 221 names inscribed on ostraka, seals, and bulla. So this is ostraka found in Jerusalem. 92 of these names contain theophoric Yahvistic component, be that suffix or prefix. Then, so these are, for example, examples of this bulla we have. Then we have another about 20 names that can be reconstructed, like Gedaliyahu, or there are 15 Yahweh prefixes or suffixes, and the rest is missing because it doesn't exist. And we have a lot of hypocoristic names, for example, Nadama, and plus there should be a divine ending. So there is another group of West Semitic common names like Ishmael, Shaphan, Achikam, and also we have foreign names like Pashehur, which is an Egyptian name. So saying this is a so-called Jerusalem type in which the most of the number names contain the Yahvistic theophoric ending. Similar larger corpora, we can find also similar composition in Arad, Horvat, Uza, and smaller corpora we find in Maresha or on the other sides. So thus I propose that there are certain sites when we look at the names, they have a very strong Yahvistic ending. Now, if we move to a different shirts, seals, and bulla, like for example Bet Shemesh or Ramat Bet Shemesh, there are 25 names, but only 5 of them have Yahvistic theophoric element. The rest of the names are common West Semitic names. And if we look at other collections like Ramat Rachel, Gibeon, Judea, and smaller collections like you can see them, it's interesting that they have the same or similar ratio between the names, number of names, and Yahvistic ending. So what is the point of this Bet Shemesh type is that the number of Yahvistic name is much, much lower in comparison with so-called Jerusalem type. Now, I would like to move to the so-called Tel Malchata type, which is a site in Judah, and we have 10 names, no Yahvistic name. If you go to Megiddo, Tel Rehov, Ashkelon, Azekah, the same. No Yahvistic name at all. We have West Semitic names, sometimes also foreign names, but that's it. Now, if we move to so-called Gezer type, we will find foreign names, like, for example, Zera, Ukin, Nergal, Shara, Utsur, and so on, and some West Semitic names, but very, very few Yahvistic names. So the number of, and you can look at, for example, Tel Hadid, this is another composition. You have enormous amount of the foreign names, but very few Yahvistic name or no Yahvistic names, and very few West Semitic names. So if you look at Tel Gemeh or Tel Gemeh, you have the similar pattern, enormous amount of foreign names, no Semitic or very few Semitic names, and no Yahwistic names. So what we can say on the basis of this? I propose that the names can be divided in this Ostraka, Sios, and Bule into 4 types: Jerusalem, Bet Shemesh, Tel Malchata, and Gezer type. Jerusalem would be a lot of Yahwistic names, strong Yahwistic presence, and you find it in Lachish, Arad, Horvat, Uza. Bet Shemesh, you have Yahwistic names, but very few of them. The majority of names is of different type. Tel Malchata, no Yahwistic names at all. Gezer, Tel Gema, Tel Hadid, they have predominantly foreign names. West Semitic and Yahwistic names are rare. So this is what we have as a context. Now, what does this mean for the biblical studies? What we can say about it? Well, biblical names in the ancient Near Eastern context. I went through all these four corporas: Jeremiah, Ezekiel, 1st Isaiah, and 1st, 2nd Kings. I analyzed all the proper names there. What we can say? Look at the Jeremiah. You have 38 Yahwistic names. And these are only the names, the type of names, and some of those names appear 2 or 3 times and can be attributed to different people. So you can multiply it. If you look at the West Semitic names, there are only 20 of them. Foreign names are only 3. I think that it's very clear that it's very similar to so-called Jerusalem pattern. If you go to Ezekiel, there are very few names, but some of them are Yahwistic, some of them are West Semitics. There are no foreign names. 1st Isaiah, so you have more Yahwistic names. Only 2 of them are the West Semitic names. And the situation in 1st, 2nd Kings is much more complex. When I look at all the names in the 1st, 2nd Kings, I found a very strange pattern. Jehoiada, Joash reform, which is sometimes about 830 BC or at the end of the 9th century, you see that Yahwistic names are only few, West Semitic names are many, many. If you look at after Jehoiada, Joash reform, the number of Yahwistic names all of a sudden is increased, and West Semitic names are this, and these are foreign names, foreign groups you can find in this corpora. The situation is much more interesting. I don't know whether you have ever been interested in the queens of Israel. So these are the queens or wives of David. If you look at, for example, Maacah was daughter of King Geshur, there is no Yahwistic names among the queens of or the wives of David. If you look at Solomon's wife, so one of them was Naamah, if you look at here, and she was the mother of Rehoboam. And she was considered to be Ammonite, so the foreign woman. If you look at another 2 queen, Maacah and Azubah, so Maacah, daughter of Abishalom, even though the dictionary says that Abishalom was Absalom, but it's probably not true. Azubah, daughter of Shilhi, it was probably a divinity. So once again, no Yahwistic name, and you have foreign names. So, queens after Jehoiada, Joash reform, the princess Yehosheba, the first queen Jehoadin, Yekoliah, and then you have Nehushta, daughter of Elnathan. Then you have another 2, probably from Jerusalem, Yerusha or Abiyahu. It could be a hypocoristic name. And then there is one queen, Yedida, daughter of Adaiah. Both of them, you see, there are Yahwistic names close to Lachish. Lachish is a Jerusalem type. And Hamutal, once again, Jeremiah, you see it's a name, Yahwistic names, and these are the ladies from the north, and we have one Hephzibah from, we don't know from where. So I propose this thing. Jerusalem time correspond to Jeremiah, Ezekiel. So what we can say that what we find in the Ostraka in Jerusalem type, it corresponds what we have in Jeremiah, Ezekiel, 1st Isaiah, and 2nd Kings 12 or 11 first. Bet Shemesh type would correspond what we have before Jehoiada and Joash. Malchata, it would correspond to David's wife, and Gezer type, there is no real correspondence. So what we can say, and these are what I would propose, a reasonable proposal, extension of Yahwistic reform. First, on the basis of this, we can conclude that it was Yahwistic renewal was a pre-exilic phenomenon. We cannot say that it's an invention of the post-exilic writers, because we have sufficient data that Yahwistic reform renewal was implemented in certain regions. It was predominant in Jerusalem and in the cities that were connected to it. So it was not everywhere. It was only in certain parts of Judah where it was strongly present. Second, the Bet Shemesh Tel Malchata type, Yahwistic religious renewal, did not extend over entire Judah. So what we have in the Bible is the position of the Jerusalemite scribes, but it was not present in the whole Judah. In some areas, it had only very limited impact, like, for example, Bet Shemesh, or there are also, I would call it, Yahweh-free areas. They simply, the divinity Yahweh didn't reach there. And what we can say, what is the hypothesis, and I'm not going to die for this hypothesis, that what this mean for the ethnic composition of Judah in that period. So I suggest here that maybe the Yahwistic name can be really considered to be Judahite. So we have some regions where more Judahites, which were more Judahite, some were more Semitic, others were rather cosmopolitan. So you can see that that we have regions which were ethnically might have been different. These ethnic groups lived rather isolated, even though being in contact through Neo-Assyrian global trade. So now, how do we, this was an example, how do we design a path from the biblical text to ancient Near Eastern historical and cultural context? Let us see the steps. I think the first very important part is the direction. If we want to find the context, we have to move from biblical text to ancient Near Eastern material, study it on its own, and from ancient Near Eastern material to biblical text. And we have to study it on its own. Then we have to compare corpora, which might be from a reasonable similar period, as I have done it, reasonable larger amount of material, respecting the nature of material to be compared, and distinguishing between conclusion, reasonable proposal, and hypothesis. So this is if we say this is what we can say, this is a reasonable conclusion, proposal, and this is a pure hypothesis I cannot prove. For example, about the ethnic composition, this is a pure hypothesis. About some reasonable proposals that the Yahwistic reform was limited only to certain regions of Judah. It's a reasonable proposal, but we would need much more data to really confirm it. And the conclusion, what we can say, that what the Yahwistic names, Yahwistic reform impact in Jeremiah, Ezekiel, First Kings, Second Kings, correspond to so-called Jerusalem Ostraka. This is a conclusion which we really can confirm. So, thank you very much.